All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Owens. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Robert McTyre, co-authors of Detroit Stories Quarterly. Also, Cornelius Fortune is another colleague who is not joining us on this particular show. But we're and we need to say up front, we used to do these for a while. We took a bit of an absence, so it's good to be back once again, and up close and in person, talking about our latest edition of Detroit Stories Quarterly. And This is the spring fall edition, I believe, of is that correct? Yeah, the spring fall edition of Detroit Stories Quarterly 2025. And we have some great stories in there, which we will talk about later. But basically, just as a part of the introduction, for those who don't know, Detroit Stories Quarterly was started about 6 years ago now, by Dr. McTyre, his Cornelius Fortune, and myself. It was Cornelius's idea, and we decided to initially start writing. We just wanted to get our own stories out there and tell our own stories our own way, the way we wanted to do it. And we wanted to do stories that were all the stories were connected to Detroit in some way, through thematically, one way or another. Every story that we have is connected to Detroit. The first few editions, we go back on our website, DetroitStoriesQuarterly.com. That's DetroitStoriesQuarterly.com. You can see all of our editions from beginning to end. And the early ones are mostly stories just from Cornelius, Doc, and myself. Later on, we were really glad to be able to invite other authors in who expressed an interest in sharing their stories. And over the years, we've had stories from a number of people. And one of our favorite authors who has passed, we'll be discussing in a minute. But his last story is in this issue. And with that, I think we can move forward. Doc, I'll hand it over to you to kind of give an overview of this particular edition, which they do come out quarterly, by the way, roughly quarterly. So we have roughly 4 editions a year, and each year. This year, I think it may have only been 3, but or will be 3. But so it's like Detroit Stories Quarterly. So mathematically, there you go. And Doc, overview of what we've got, what people can expect in this current edition.
Thank you so much, Keith. It's great to be back. Yeah, this edition, every edition is always kind of an experience unto itself. And those of us who've been in, publishing long enough, that, you can kind of go back and you can think about, here's one edition, and you think about the experiences, everything behind the scenes that occurs. This one in particular, of course, as you mentioned, Keith, actually, it's historic in some ways. I mean, our beloved co-worker, colleague, friend, and of course, a longtime friend of yours, Luther Keith, who passed away in recent weeks, and who has been, he was one of our significant contributors with the DSQ from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But we'll have some words to say about that in a moment. I'm just going to give just a look at our table of contents for this edition. So Luther's story is first. The title of his story is The Last Blues Man. And those of you who have stayed with us over these past 5 years, you'll know that Luther always focused on the world of blues, and particularly the mindset of the blues man itself. So this one is a quintessential example of that kind of focus and genre that he was involved in. Next is Keith's story, Designer Dreams by Bob. Keith always comes up with these. I love his, and this is part 1, by the way.
Right.
Now we know. Keith is I call him Keith Jesse Owens a lot of times, because he runs the distance when it comes to writing. And this is an excellent story, really about this whole concept of how we deal with dreams. There's a little bit of Inception, that movie a few years ago.
Yeah.
That dealt with dreams, that's in there, but Keith will have something to say about that in a moment. My story, The God Pill, is kind of a mixture of a little bit of comic book fiction, along with the spiritual quality, along with community aspirations, things that I really would like to see happen for the better in Detroit. So, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. The last four are The Psychic by our own F.R. Wilson, who has contributed a lot to us, our work over the years. And then there's a piece, the River Runs Black. This is written by T.R. Gannon. He's actually one of my students in my English 104 class about a year or so ago. I made an offer to the students. I brought up our website, Keith, and told them about DSQ. And a lot of them were interested, but Tom, in particular, he's really serious about writing and what have you. He's pursuing an English literature degree, actually submitted some work. So his piece, of course, with the Detroit theme in it, very interesting. And then the last two one is a revisiting of a story that we've had before by me, The Adventures of TT and Tess. That's my sisters, my siblings who are tech geniuses, and they get into all kinds of tomfoolery. This one in particular is a play on Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which we know the movie Blade Runner was based on. This one deals with a autonomous vehicle that goes amok, and I won't give it away, but it does link to things that happen in Detroit. And then the last piece, and this is probably, we saved the best for last. We are experimenting with artificial intelligence. Yes, we are, audience. Yes, we are. This was our first foray. You let us know what you think about this. This is a story that was actually written by ChatGPT. And it's simply based on a prompt that was given to it, generally asking it to provide a short story about Detroit in the future, a couple of 100 years from now, what would that look like, sort of thing. And the title of that story is Ashes of the Motor Mind. We'll have more to talk about that as we proceed, but that's our roll call. So with that, Keith, I want to send it back to you to get us just some reflections on again, Luther Keith. There's so much to say about him, man, but I think you've been doing a great job in some of your commemorations and what have you that you've been doing, which one of them was in the Free Press. So
Yes,
without further ado, Keith, go ahead.
well, thank you, Doc, and also please feel free to contribute because I know you knew Luther as well. But Luther and I, just briefly, we are friendship. Well, Luther passed in March. First of all, Luther passed in March this year. We were friends for close to 40 years, and he and I were both. He was an editor at the Detroit News, reporter editor Detroit News, also founder of the community, free nonprofit community organization, Arise Detroit, and he was also a great blues musician. I played in Luther's band for about 5 years, and his blues name was Luther Badman Keith. So he was talented in multiple ways, very, very generous individual, very good person. And he passed away unexpectedly. Literally, Luther was the youngest person ever inducted into the Michigan Journalism Hall of Fame. Luther nominated me to be inducted, and literally nominated me 3 times in a row. And the third time, I was inducted this year. And in March, when he found out, Luther called me, invited me down to Baker's Keyboard Lounge. For those who don't know, it's a jazz club here in Detroit, reputedly the oldest jazz club in the country. And we met at Baker's, and that's when he told me that I had been inducted. And he brought his own trophy to show me. He said, "This is what you're going to get. This is what it looks like." And then at that point, he also told me he wanted to have a party for me at Baker's. He was going to be having, or was already having, monthly, I think it's monthly, monthly jam sessions at Baker's performance every Tuesday night. And so the next one, which was literally just a couple weeks from now, a little over a couple weeks, he said he was gonna have a celebration party from he and I we jammed together. First time we had in years, had a great time. A number of musicians came down, a lot of my friends. It was Doc was there with his wife Carmela, and it was a great night. We had just a really good time, and at the end of it, he literally said, he told me, and also I understood told his daughter, and we said, this may be the best night I've ever had performing. I think I played better than I've ever played. And I woke up about 5 o'clock in the morning, had a text from him saying, that was timed about 12:45 in that morning, saying how much he enjoyed it, and everybody else had a ball. And I texted him back, and I didn't know that when at that time I texted him, he was already gone. He had died probably just a couple hours before I texted him back. And he literally he has a man cave in the basement of his house. I used to we hang out there a lot, have a good time. We watch movies, eat chicken, have a great time. And he had gone down there after the gig and passed away in his sleep. No sickness, no illness, just passed away. And so that's Luther. But as Doc said, he was a great contributor and great supporter of Detroit Stories Quarterly from the early days, and he's always written great, just totally kind of stories you wouldn't see anywhere else. Not just because of the subject matter, just the way Luther writes it. They really exhibit his humor, his sense of humor, and his just different way of looking at things. And this last one, Doctor and I were talking a little bit before the show. And when you read, and if you knew Luther, you'll really kind of get the same kind of chill when you read his story. Call number one, just the title, The Last Blues Man, and the way the story goes. The funny part is he just has I have it up, and he always had these great characters, and this blues man character was written by the Drop the Bomb Misfortune was the name of the blues musician, and only Luther could come with a name like that. The Drop the Bomb Misfortune is the guy's name. But at the very end of the story, and it's a very short story, not more than a couple of pages. He said, a reporter was asking him his perspective on what had happened to the blues and why people weren't listening to the blues as much and what may have happened. And then the reporter asked him, "So what's next for you? Do you ever think about the future?" What's next for me? The bomb tugged at his very white beard at the thought. A jam session in the sky, he said. That's where all my friends are. And just reading that now, it just is a chill, because this is the last published piece that Luther ever wrote, and so we're really proud to have that in our magazine. Luther's loss is still tugs at me a lot. Everybody that knew him, but I'm just so glad we were able to at least be. And for me, in two ways, I was able to be with him on his last performance, and where he enjoyed, and then also to have his last published word. So it's a double. It hurts in both ways. Also a very good thing. Very much of a blessing. So that's my reflection on Luther, and I think I guess what's next. I think I want to just kind of move from there to kind of talking about. Doc had mentioned my story. Was a dream.
Well, Keith, if you don't mind, just real briefly, just a little bit, because what you said is so eloquent, and I'm definitely not really not too much more, but I do want to make mention. I couldn't help the minute that I learned of Luther's passing. Even though it's not exactly the same thing in the Bible, in Genesis, in the 5th chapter, there's the story of Enoch, and Enoch is the only recorded individual in the Bible where the wording is that God took him. He was favorable to God, and God took him. Bible scholars, they say, well, he was translated, that in fact he was moved physically from earth right into heaven. But I just like to think there's a similarity to that, because there was just such a peaceful transition for him to have have had that wonderful experience that night before, and then God took him essentially during that time. And uh, I will say this about Luther, because, Keith, you have covered the whole journalism and writing aspect of Luther. Um, but interesting, I had like a second life experience with Luther because I've been in, Carmela and I, we've been back living in Detroit for about the last 3-4 years. And I've been very much involved in my community here on the east side of Detroit, 7 Mile, Sherwood, Concord, Van Dyke area. And I came across this one community leader named Shirley Birch, who she was like this tough lady. Miss Birch passed away just about a year or so ago, but she was the one who came up with these signs, lawn signs that says, uh, uh, love where you live, love Detroit, love where you live. And I wanted my block club to be able to get some of those. And in the process of that, I learned that she was very much connected with this group called Arise Detroit. And then she mentions in passing Luther Keith. And I said, how's Luther involved with, I didn't even know this. I go on the website, and it's like this whole, I said, oh my God, I've known Luther all of these years, in the whole writing and journalism, even the stuff we were doing with DSQ, and I never connected him having, and Luther, I mean, he's like his work is very significant here. I mean, Arise Detroit, every year they would do this big thing that Miss Birch would connect with, and he would help her promote it. So I say that to say, literally, Luther had some big feet anyway, but he really has some big shoes to fill in terms of his heart for the community. And that's something I'm really striving for. I really want to, he's been a role model for me, Keith, as far as taking, our creative skills and turning that into doing stuff that can really make our community better. He's really a great example of that. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to say there. But this is now a time, please, Keith, give us, a good now synopsis of your story that's appearing in our edition. I'll mention mine, and then we'll have some few words to bring things to a close. But whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay. Well, no, first of all, thank those. That was a great remembrance of Luther. Like they just, it's kind of amazing all the ground that he covered. And it's like this is like takes off one cape and puts on another. But it's great. But yeah, in terms of my story, Doc had talked about mentioned it early on in looking over the stories that are in our in the latest edition of the magazine, and Designer Dreams by Bob. I said part 1, and it was as Doc said, I enjoyed writing it, and where it came from really wasn't when I was a kid. I dreamed hard. I still dream. Some people say they get older and they don't dream as much. I still do, and dreams, good and bad, had a lot to do with my childhood because they were very vivid, and sometimes waking up and thinking I was awake and I wasn't, and having those dreams where you couldn't quite get up and then you're trying to get up, and then I remember times there all in more than one dream I would have to like try to bite my tongue or try to knock my head against the wall to wake myself or shake myself as hard as I could. And sometimes that would work. I would just shake myself until I was awake, and then I'd have to just force my eyes to stay open until I stayed awake, or I would slip back into it. So those experiences with dreams and just the vividness of them, and remembering them, and things that happened, kind of started the basis with this in terms of, like I say, examining dreams, but also it's looking in terms of looking at someone who makes his living by selling dreams, and his background and what led to that. Bob, it's it opens up with the guy who's trying to figure out who this guy is and where it came from, because all of a sudden this place just kind of showed up in the cast corridor of this building, and he has people over who dream, and basically they people could come over, pay their money, kind of like they say the old fashioned, like those smoke shops or hookah shops, where people can just come in, pay, and then just smoke their hookahs. Sometimes in Muslim countries, the same kind of thing. Just pay your money, come in, lay down on the couch, and begin your dream. And so it goes into that. And I think where I really enjoy, because the way my stories, people say there's two different kind of writers. There's the planner and there's the pantser, and I've always been the pantser. I mean, I can kind of point at. I always kind of give a bit of a. I always end my when I write. I never end the sentence, so I can just pick up running. And I give a few tips, a few edges as I write about the next scene, write about this or write about that. But generally, I have no idea where it's going, and I didn't know. That's the most part. That goes with my books. I mean, I don't know. I just started with an idea, and then it kind of goes from there. And where it began to lead was really into the full background of Bob and how it came up, and what the dreams, uh, what they were to him, and then his lineage, because he was, it came from his mother and from his grandmother, and another. I don't want to give everything away, but the whole lineage of how that was kind of passed down to him, against his will, and him his examining that, and the stories, and what happened, and I think that because when you hear people talk about things like that, where they talk about certain, I guess, quote unquote, gifts they have for those who subscribe to that, there's always the talk about the lineage. Where did it come from? How did it come to be that way? What formed them? Bob is on the outsider, who was kind of tossed away from a group, and used to run with a circus crew. I mean, there's so many things in there, and I think that's the thing and it's also a story, that took me a long time to write. A lot of stories don't take me quite as, the amount of time, but with this one, actually there's a part two. I came back to it several times, working it out and having to kind of reread from the beginning to kind of get a running start again. But overall, yeah, this is a story about what, not just what causes dreams, but who are what kind of people really put that much stock in them, and what, why they mean so much, and just kind of a character study of an individual who's made his living and his life, committed to dream, and sharing dreams, and is it real, or is he a huckster? All the kind of examining what exactly is it that he's doing, and so that's what that story is about. And I hope when people read it, they will, enjoy that. Maybe kind of take, anybody who reads this, is a dreamer like I am. Well, we want to take a look, kind of look at some of their own things, and just wonder, where do they come from? I mean, we know the scientific explanation, but then there's always, could be other explanations too, about what they come from, why you dream about a certain thing at a certain time. What does it mean? Why do some dreams stick with you? Some of them just evaporate as soon as you wake up. They've always fascinated me. So that's what it is. And that's it.
Okay.
I'll turn over to you, Doc.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Keith. Yeah. Yeah. The designer dreams piece is fascinating. It really does, pique, I think, the interest of the reader, to examine, the power of dreams and all of that. And I appreciate you pursuing that topic. And it's a two-part story, right?
Yeah.
So part two will come in our next edition. My story, the God pill, is literally about a pill that can create, a sense of godliness, so to speak. It comes from, well, a couple. There's several, kind of influences. Keith, you'll recall this movie. It came out during the early 2000s, called Limitless. And it's about this guy, who comes upon a pill that gives him limitless access to his brain. I mean, there's a whole lot involved with it, um, but I always found it that fascinating, the idea that perhaps there's some kind of pill that can to be able, where you can just make you super smart. And of course, being a spiritual person, eventually I came upon, well, what would happen? What would happen if there's a pill that just makes people do stuff right, just because it's the right thing to do? Why not? I mean, we come up with pills for everything else. Why not come up with a God pill, right, or a Jesus pill, or whatever deity that you are recognizing? The point is of turning the human heart into something that strives to improve things. Now, so my story deals with that, but there's also this other part of me, and this goes back to when I was Detroit Fire Department EMT for Detroit EMS during my 8 years from 77 to 85, which was at the height of the Devil's Night fires, right? Those of you who know Detroit history know that the night before Halloween, there were always these fires going on. Toward my concluding years with EMS, I had started going into journalism and all of that, so I had really kind of an analytical mind. And I started to wonder, because some of it was so weirdly coordinated, some of these fires. And there were stories that raised the question, was this arson just to, kind of clear property out, to kind of make, and just a way of using Detroit as another way of, generating revenue for folks outside the city, and all of that. And we're best to, get rid of stuff than in Detroit, right? Nobody's going to raise a question, oh, that's just Detroit kind of thing. And this led eventually to my story, where in fact there is some evidence that in fact there is an effort to make certain parts of Detroit really uninhabitable, ghettoizing it, quote unquote, so that those who are still stable, they don't want to live there, they'll move to the suburbs. And of course, the more vacant land we have, the more that creates opportunity for I call them speculators, to come in and buy up the land cheap. And to some extent, a little of that seems to be happening. So this story is kind of designed to get us to think about that. And the good news, of course, is that the God pill kind of serves as there's one individual, a preacher, who is actually, he's a good preacher, but then he goes to the dark side, so to speak. He gets influenced by money and these speculators, everybody buy him off. But then something happens miraculously, and the God pill comes to him. And when the God pill, when he gets that, he has a change of heart, and he does something really transformational that not only transforms Detroit, but eventually the world, and even the White House. I make mention of that too. Right. So the very last thing I want to say too about the God pill is that it is a little bit of a drawing from in the DC comics in the Golden Age. There was this hero called Our Man, Hour, and he came up. This guy, he was a chemist, came up with a pill where we give him superpowers for an hour. So between that comic book and the movie Limitless, I kind of put this all together, and that's where that came from. So it should be an interesting story for those of you who are paranoid like me and a little suspicious of all of these good things that are happening in Detroit, and and how some of this all came about. So
I think
all
it's
right, so
a story.
yeah.
And I'll just say also, the thing that I think of people, because a lot of times people, I think, particularly lovers of sci-fi like us, will really kind of distance themselves from anything spiritual, and because there's science and there's science and God. It's like there's two, and I'm like, but they're, and I admit when I first read it, I'm like, whoa, Straight up, but I think
A
that
little bit of contradiction in terms, right?
right, it's like, wait a minute, but but then at the same time, people that I think the people that look at that, it's like, but to me, science is the best evidence of God there is, or whatever you call it, that whatever, like you say, whatever, how
Yes.
is a deity, but I mean,
Yeah.
just that the existence of just the way things work is like, well, if that's not proof, I don't know
Yeah.
what is. So, but without getting going down that line, I just think this may be one of the few places there's not too many other science fiction stories I think out there that pull those two together, so well. And it's great to have it in a Detroit context. So, but yeah, we're closing in on the show. I know one thing we both want to do. I'm just a little bit about the process in terms of how we write, and just I don't know if I would say word wisdom. A lot of people out there have wisdom why, but just in terms of my own process, and then Doc, I want you to add yours as well. Um, in terms of the writing process, I think I said before, I'm a pantser, so I just see where the story takes me. Yeah, it's my feel more like a channel, which I enjoy, frankly. Just like with music, you just don't know where it just comes through you. And I think the thing with writing, it's just more fun to see what to look on and say, where'd that come from, and how that. But I think also, but you can't be a pantser or a planner without really committing yourself to the craft, and without discipline, and without, I think one of my best teacher I ever had was my creative writing teacher in college, who
Mm.
pushed us to just write. That was the main thing.
Yeah.
Just continually write. And if you're writing, obviously we all wish we could have tons of followers and people bowing down at our feet and loving all of our stories. And I'd love to say that sometimes people, love what we're doing and like my stories, and other times, I write a lot of stories on other platforms and barely get a response. But
Mhm.
I continue to write. That's the thing, because that's all I know how to do. And and I think that's the best to anybody aspiring writer. I think it's like sometimes you make things more complex than they have to be. If you're an aspiring writer, then write. If you're an aspiring musician, then play. Then get an instrument and play. I think, and then everything goes from there. The obvious is the marketing, is the promotion, all those stuff. But the bottom line, and you look at the trajectories of so many successful artists of all types, is that,
Mhm.
like they said, there's no overnight success. Somebody, they were doing what they were doing. They were discovering them when they were doing what they were doing.
Yep.
One of my musical heroes is Jimi Hendrix, and the guy Chaz Chandler just discovered him in Greenwich Village. He's like, on the news of the head, there's this wild guy down there doing this. He was just doing what he was doing. I mean, this was before there was marketing, there wasn't promotion, there wasn't, and not to disparage any of that, because it's very, very, it's an important thing. It's things that artists should know
Sure.
about. But I mean, but literally, there's so many who were not. They were just doing. They were the main thing they were doing. Above all that was they were practicing their craft,
Mhm.
and continually without stop, no matter what, they practiced their craft, and that's what brought the attention, and that's what brought everything else. And I think that's what I try to keep in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, and I would just tell our audience, Keith Owens is an excellent example of the discipline necessary. His words really, I certainly connect directly with that. The fact that you write for the purpose of writing, and by doing so, that's you improve as you continue to do it continually. It's a discipline, and doing it regularly strengthens the skills that you need to be effective as a writer. The only thing I would add to this is and this is kind of an open ended discussion, is that with the development of artificial intelligence, we're all kind of in this brand new Wild West kind of situation. But when it comes to being creative, the human factor is still the most important. This school year, I'll be, one of many educators working through developing appropriate policies and all of that, so that we can find creative ways and good ways to coexist with it, where while we can develop as writers, we can find a way to use it to develop as writers, but we're not letting it do our work for us, so to speak. So um, And of course, our story in DSQ, we have a nice little editorial in there. Please take note of it prior to that story that really explains our position on this. And we'll have more to say about this in the months to come in some of our subsequent podcasts. So with that, Keith,
I think we've had,
I'm good.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
good. Only one quick thing I would add about the AI though too is that,
yeah.
and like I said, please take note of the editorial we have at the beginning because like everybody else, we're wrestling with it. But from practice as practitioners of sci-fi, I think understanding the questions that people have, but AI is the essence of sci-fi. AI
Mm,
is sci-fi. You know, I mean, when you're able to just say something, a couple of words to a machine, and it can create a story or create an image, that's science fiction. I mean, so I think, and what I'm saying is that how can we not engage with that? You know, we have to figure out how to wrestle it, how to make it work for us, how not to abuse it, and that's, as Doc said, that's the real challenge. But we've been dealing with this challenge since the ages. I mean, since people, when used to ride horses before those. I mean, cavemen you used to do. I mean, everything changes. You know, we don't ride horses anymore. Not we don't have to anymore. We don't ride and train. I mean, all these things happen. But I think when I look at I do see the threat that's there and the thing that's scary, but also as science practitioners of science fiction, that science fiction come to life. So I mean, if anybody needs to deal and work to deal with this, we do. Because
that's it.
basically look like one
Yeah.
of our stories come to life. And
Mhm.
but anyway, without going on, we will have a lot more to say about that later. And ran a little over time. That's fine. Good to be back with everyone and one on one, and we'll be in touch later as we have more shows in the future. And I hope you'll join us. And again, thanks so much. See you next
All
time.
right. All right. Good show. Thanks, Keith.
Yep.